I looked at myself in the mirror, adjusting my plain black dress. I had picked the simplest outfit I owned on purpose. On my desk was a basic MacBook I only used when I visited family. Its screen showed a few simple digital art pieces, not too fancy, nothing that would reveal the company I had secretly built. An invitation to the Renner family reunion was sitting on my kitchen counter. The gold letters on the card shone in the morning sunlight. As always, it was being held at my sister Emily's mansion in Myrtle Beach. "Join us for a celebration of family success," it read. I couldn't help but wonder if they'd ever celebrate anything I'd done. My phone buzzed. A message from my CFO popped up. "Contracts are ready. Ashley, Renner Tech's board just approved the sale. They have no idea Dreamscape Animation Studios is the buyer." I smiled and put the phone in my purse. After 11 years of hiding my success, everything was finally falling into place. The drive to Myrtle Beach gave me time to think about how I got here. Growing up in the Renner family meant one thing: business came first. My father, Jeremy Renner, had built Renner Tech from scratch and turned it into a respected software company. My sister Emily followed in his footsteps. She got an MBA from Harvard and quickly climbed the ranks in the company. And then there was me, the disappointment. I was the daughter who doodled in her notebooks instead of reading business plans. "Art isn't a career, Ashley," my father used to say, clearly disappointed. "It's a hobby at best, a waste of time at worst." I still remember the day I told them I was going to art school to study animation instead of going to Wharton. The dining room went silent. "You're throwing your life away," Emily had said. My mother just wiped her tears with a napkin, like I had told them I was dying. What they didn't know, and what I never told them, was that I had also been secretly taking night classes in business administration. While they thought I was wasting time drawing, I was also learning how to run a company. I was actually building something much bigger than my family could imagine. My first short animated film won a student contest. The prize wasn't huge, just $7,000 and a bit of attention from people in the industry, but it was enough to get started. I used the money to hire 2 other artists. We worked from my small apartment, creating videos for small businesses. That's when I noticed something important. Companies really needed good animation. They wanted training videos, marketing content, and product demos. There was a big demand for high-quality digital work, but not many studios could deliver it professionally. In just 3 years, my small team grew to 20 people. We officially became Dreamscape Animation Studios. I used my middle name, Hannah, on all the business paperwork. So instead of Ashley Renner, the world knew me as Ashley Hannah, the name behind what would become one of the most creative animation studios in the country. Of course, my family didn't know any of this. To them, I was still just Ashley, the struggling artist who sometimes sold digital art online or did freelance jobs for local businesses. Whenever they asked how work was going, I only told them enough to keep up the act. As Emily's mansion came into view, I saw the perfectly trimmed lawn and spotless landscaping. It was exactly what I expected from someone who saw success in things like house size and designer brands. Fancy cars filled the circular driveway, making my old Dodge stand out even more. I parked at the edge and checked my reflection one last time. I had left my expensive clothes at home. I wore light makeup, simple hair, and a plain outfit. Everything planned to fit the image my family had of me, the struggling artist, the disappointment. "Ashley," my mother called from across the driveway as I walked up. "We were starting to wonder if you'd make it." I gave her the usual air kiss. Her eyes quickly looked over my outfit, probably guessing the price and finding it nicely unimpressive. "Traffic," I said, following her into the house. "And I had to finish a commission." "Oh, someone actually paid for your drawings?" she asked. The pause before the word drawings was small but clear, meant to remind me she didn't think much of my work. If only she knew that just yesterday, I signed off on a $70 million deal with a major tech company for a series of animated training videos. Instead, I just smiled and said, "Just a small business website. Nothing special." The house looked exactly the same as it had at past family events, flashy and full of signs of success. Photos covered the walls. Emily at her Harvard graduation, Emily with the Renner Tech board, Emily on the cover of Business Weekly. The only photo of me was from high school, taken before I ever left home. Everyone had been let down when I chose art instead of business. The big living room was already full of relatives when we walked in. People were talking about stocks, company deals, and the latest market news. My cousin Jeremy stood near the fireplace, bragging about his hedge fund's newest purchase. Aunt Betty was proudly showing photos of her son's new startup. And right in the middle of it all was Emily, looking perfect in a dress I recognized as a $150,000 Oscar de la Renta. "Ashley," she called out, her voice dripping with fake kindness. "I'm so glad you could take a break from your art to join us." She hugged me quickly, being careful not to wrinkle her dress. "You look," she paused, trying to find a nice word. "Comfortable." "Thanks," I said, tugging at my simple dress from Target, playing the role she expected from me. "Your dress is beautiful," I added. "Oscar de la Renta," she said proudly, smoothing it out. "A little treat to celebrate our latest deal. Renner Tech just bought out our biggest competitor in enterprise software." I had to hold back a smile. If only she knew that by this time tomorrow, Renner Tech would belong to my small animation company. "That's great," I said. "Sounds like things are going well." "Better than ever," she said, beaming. "In fact, I was just telling everyone about our next big step. We're moving into digital content. Corporate training videos, marketing animations, things like that." My heart skipped a beat. That's exactly why I decided to buy Renner Tech. They were about to move into my world. They had no idea they were about to work for me. "Animation?" I asked, acting curious. "That sounds tricky." Emily laughed loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "Oh, Ashley, it's all about business planning. The drawing part is just technical. We hire people to do that." She waved her hand in my direction. "People like you." Other family members had started to gather around after hearing Emily's laugh. "Still drawing cartoons, Ashley?" my cousin Jeremy asked, grinning. "If you ever want a real job, my hedge fund could use an assistant." "Thanks," I said quietly, "but I'm doing fine with my art." "Okay," Emily said, raising an eyebrow. "Is that why you're still driving that old Dodge? Still living in that tiny apartment?" They had no idea that I owned the entire building my apartment was in, or that I also had a Porsche and 2 Teslas. The Dodge was just for family visits. "I get by," I shrugged. "Not everyone needs a mansion." "Getting by isn't the same as succeeding," my father's voice said from behind me. I turned and saw him watching me with that same disappointed look he'd always had. "Emily's latest deal is worth more than you'll probably make in your whole life, drawing pictures." I felt a quick burst of anger, but I pushed it down. In less than a day, they'd all see how wrong they were. The contracts were signed, the press release was written, and by this time tomorrow, Ashley Hanna would be revealed as the CEO of Dreamscape Animation Studios and the new owner of Renner Tech. But for now, I just smiled and went to get a drink. Let them have their moment of feeling better than me. Let them believe what they always had about me. After all, revenge is an art too. The family reunion went on into the evening. Every hour seemed to bring a new chance for my relatives to remind me of how they thought I'd failed. I kept checking my phone, seeing messages from my team confirming that everything was ready for the big reveal tomorrow. The press release was approved. The Austin Times had the exclusive. The board's transition papers were all set. I was standing by the big windows, watching the sunset over Emily's perfectly manicured garden, when my father walked up. He had a glass of his favorite scotch, the same brand I kept in my office, although he didn't know that. "Ashley," he said, his voice still carrying that usual disappointed tone, "your mother and I have been talking." I braced myself. These talks never went well. "Emily's new digital content division is going to need artists," he continued. "Basic stuff. Nothing too creative, but it'll be steady work. Benefits. A real salary." He said real, like what I did wasn't real work. "She's willing to give you a chance, despite your lack of business experience." I took a sip of my champagne to hide the smile I wanted to show. If only he knew that my company made almost 4 times more money in digital services than Renner Tech. "Thanks, Dad, but I'm okay with my freelance work." He sighed heavily. "Ashley, you're 33 years old. Don't you think it's time to stop playing around with drawings and join the real world? Look at your sister. She's made something of herself. Through the window, I could see Emily surrounded by the family, probably telling them another story of her business successes. She was always good at making sure everyone knew how successful she was. I know you think art is just playing around, I said carefully, but there's more to it than you realize. Is there? He waved at my simple dress and plain look, because from where I stand, all I see is wasted potential. You could have gone to Wharton. You could have been part of Renner Tech's legacy. Instead, you threw it all away for what? Digital doodles. His words stung even after all these years. Even though I knew what I knew, I almost told him everything. I opened my mouth to speak, but then my phone buzzed. A message from my COO lit up the screen. Renner Tech board members all confirmed for tomorrow's 10 a.m. meeting. They have no idea what's coming. I closed my mouth. I could wait. Just 13 more hours. Actually, I could wait a lifetime. What? My father asked. Nothing, I said. You're right. I made my choices. He shook his head and walked away. I stood there, watching the last bit of sunlight fade behind the trees. Across the room, I heard Emily laughing. Ashley's always been different, she was telling Aunt Betty. Some people just aren't made for real success. At least she's finally accepting the help we're offering. I glanced at my watch. 8:15 p.m. In less than 15 hours, everything would change. The rest of the night blurred together, a mix of fake smiles, polite insults, and offers of help. Cousin Jeremy offered to teach me the basics of accounting. Aunt Betty suggested her daughter help me build a real website for my little art business. Even my mom quietly showed me job listings for graphic design roles at local companies. Through it all, I stayed calm. I smiled. I acted like the struggling artist they all thought I was. But inside, I was just counting down the minutes. Finally, as the night ended, Emily caught me near the coat check. I hope you'll think seriously about Dad's offer, she said, pretending to be concerned. The job wouldn't be too hard. Just some simple drawings, corporate slides, training manuals, stuff like that. We'd start you with a beginner salary, of course. But that's still better than what you're making now. I thought about my penthouse office looking over Barrow Nature Preserve Park. About the 200-plus artists and animators working for me. About the big project we were launching. One that would change the future of animation. I'll think about it, I said. Don't take too long, she warned. Once we announce our new digital content division next week, we'll get tons of qualified applicants. I'm only offering this because your family. I nodded and took my coat from the attendant. Speaking of announcements, I asked, will you be at the office tomorrow? Of course, she said proudly. 10 a.m. sharp. We have a big meeting with a mystery buyer. Some animation studio wants to partner with us. She gave a smug smile. See what happens when you aim higher than just drawing pictures? Good luck with the meeting, I said, turning to leave. Ashley, she called after me. That outfit you're wearing, if you take the job, you'll need to dress more professionally. Appearance matters in the business world. I looked down at my simple dress, then thought about the closet full of designer clothes waiting at home. I'll keep that in mind, I said. And then I drove home. I finally let myself feel the full weight of what was about to happen. 11 years of hiding my success, of letting my family think I was a failure, had all led to this moment. Back in my penthouse, I took off the struggling artist costume and changed into my silk pajamas, the ones that cost more than Emily's fancy Oscar de la Renta dress. My real laptop, not the one I brought to family events, was open on my desk. On the screen were the final documents for the Renner Tech acquisition. A message popped up from my assistant. Everything's ready for tomorrow. Carl pick you up at 8 a.m. The Renner Tech board still doesn't know you'll be there. I poured myself a glass of scotch, the same kind my father was drinking earlier, and stepped out onto the terrace. Below me, the city sparkled like a sea of electric stars. Somewhere out there, Emily was probably still bragging to her husband, telling him how she planned to help her poor artist sister. My phone rang, the private line only my executive team used. It was Tyler, my COO. Ashley, he said, just wanted to check that you're ready. Once we make the announcement, everything changes. Your family, they'll finally know the truth. Are you sure you want to do it this way? We could send someone else. You don't have to reveal who you are just yet. I thought about my father's disapproval, Emily's smug attitude, and every time I had been treated like I wasn't enough, just because I chose art over business. No, I said. I want to be there. I want to see their faces when they realize who they've really been talking down to. After I hung up, I stayed out on the terrace for a while, thinking about the long road that had brought me here. Every rude comment, every fake smile, every family party where I stayed silent, it had all built up to this. Tomorrow, they would finally see that the daughter they thought had failed had actually created something bigger than they ever dreamed. Tomorrow, they would understand that success doesn't always look the way they expect. Tomorrow, Ashley, the struggling artist, would be revealed as Ashley Hanna, CEO of Dreamscape Animation Studios and the new owner of Renner Tech. I smiled and raised my glass to the glowing city below. The art of staying hidden was over. Now came the masterpiece, the big reveal. The next morning, the Renner Tech boardroom looked just like I remembered from childhood visits. Dark wood, leather chairs, and the proud look of old money. I stood in the private elevator, dressed in a custom Chanel suit that cost more than 7 months of the entry-level job Emily had offered me. "Ready, Miss Hannah?" Tyler asked, standing beside me. We had been through it all together since the days when Dreamscape was just 4 people working in my apartment. I looked at my reflection in the mirrored elevator walls. The image of the struggling artist was gone. Today, I looked exactly like what I truly was, a confident CEO. "Ready," I said, just as the elevator doors opened onto the executive floor. Inside the boardroom, Emily was already talking excitedly to the board members. My father sat at the head of the table, looking powerful in his tailored suit. Neither of them noticed me at first. They were too busy discussing their future plans. Plans that were about to change completely. The Dreamscape team should arrive any minute, Emily was saying. Once we sign this deal, Renner Tech will lead the digital content market. Actually, I said, stepping into the room, there's been a slight change of plans. The room went quiet. Emily's mouth dropped open. For once, she looked completely shocked. "Ashley," my father said, standing up. He looked confused. "What are you doing here? This is a private board meeting." I smiled and set my briefcase on the table. I know exactly what this meeting is. In fact, I'm the one who called it. "This is ridiculous," Emily snapped, finding her voice. "Security. That won't be necessary," Tyler said calmly, stepping into the room beside me. "Miss Hannah has every right to be here." "Hannah." Emily frowned. "Her name is Renner." "Actually," I said as I opened my briefcase and handed out documents, "Ashley Hanna is my professional name. It's the name I used to build Dreamscape Animation Studios from the ground up. And it's the name you're all about to hear a lot more often." My father's face went pale as he looked at the papers in front of him, contracts, signed agreements, and a press release ready to go live. This can't be real," he whispered. "Oh, but it is," I said, sitting down at the opposite end of the table. "Let me tell you a story about a girl who loved both art and business, who took night classes in business while going to art school, who saw a gap in the market for high-quality corporate animation, and who built a company that now earns over $300 million a year." Emily grabbed the documents, flipping through them with shaking hands. You're Ashley Hanna?" she asked. "The CEO of Dreamscape?" "That's right," I said. "The company you've been trying to make a deal with? It's mine. Has been since I started it 11 years ago, right around the time you all decided I was ruining my life." "But you're just an artist," she said, stumbling over the words. "You live in a tiny apartment. You drive a Dodge." I laughed. "I own the building where that apartment is. The Dodge is just the car I use for family visits. Would you have preferred I showed up in my Porsche? Or one of the Teslas? Just to give you something else to judge." I couldn't ignore the look on my father's face. He was still staring at the documents, especially the page showing Dreamscape's current market value. "All this time," he said quietly. "Yes," I replied. "All those family gatherings where you made fun of my career. All the times you offered help like I couldn't make it on my own. Every time you compared me to Emily's so-called real success, I was building something bigger than Renner Tech ever dreamed of. Why? Emily demanded. Why hide it? Why let us think you were failing? Because you never would have accepted it, I said, cutting her off. You would have tried to take it over. You'd make it part of the Renner Tech empire. You would have turned my company into just another division. I had to build this on my own terms. I stood up and smoothed out my tailored suit. And now, as of 10 a.m. this morning, Dreamscape Animation Studios officially owns Renner Tech. We'll be restructuring the company. We're moving toward innovation, not just tradition. I looked at her calmly. Emily, your role as CEO is being removed. But you're welcome to apply for a position in our creative department. I turned to my father. And you'll be moved into an advisory role until your retirement next month. The room went completely silent. Even the board members, who usually agreed with whatever my father said, just stared, speechless. You can't do this, Emily finally whispered. Actually, I already did, I said. The board approved the sale last week. They just didn't know who the buyer was. Now the contracts are signed and the press release is going out. I glanced at my watch. In about 15 minutes. Right on time, my phone buzzed. The Austin Times headline lit up the screen. Art meets tech. Dreamscape Animation Studios acquires Renner Tech in surprise deal. CEO Ashley Hanna shares vision for digital innovation. I turned the screen so they could see. Oh, and Emily, I added, about that entry-level job you offered me yesterday, I'll have to turn it down. I'm a little overqualified. The next hour passed in a blur. The board signed the transition papers. My father sat quietly, still trying to process it all. The chair he had led from for so many years was no longer his. As the board members left the room, only my family remained. Emily finally spoke, her voice flat. All these years, you let us think you were struggling. You let us feel sorry for you. No, I said. You chose to see me that way. You chose to believe I was a failure. You never even thought I might be something more. My father stood slowly, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Ashley, save it, I said, gently but firmly. This wasn't about revenge. I did this because it made sense. Dreamscape needs Renner Tech's resources to grow. And Renner Tech needs our innovation to survive in today's world. I gathered my things and got ready to leave. There's a family dinner tonight at River City Grill to officially announce the merger, I said. I hope you'll both be there. They nodded without saying anything. Good. Oh, and Emily, I added as I reached the door. Make sure to dress professionally. You know, appearance matters in the business world. The ride back to my office was quiet. Tyler knew me well enough to give me space. He didn't say anything until we were back at my penthouse office, overlooking the city. Feel good, he asked. I looked out the window, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. It feels right, I said. Like finishing a painting I've been working on for 11 years. My phone was full of messages. Relatives who had just seen the news. People who had once dismissed me as the struggling artist, now realizing I was one of the most successful CEOs in digital media. Cousin Jeremy, the one who offered to teach me basic accounting, had already sent 4 messages, asking if we could talk about potential synergies with his hedge fund. Aunt Betty, who said her daughter could build me a real website, was calling over and over. Even my mother had texted, "Why didn't you tell us?" I didn't reply to any of them. They'd all have a chance to talk at dinner tonight. Instead, I opened my laptop and got to work on the speech I'd give to the Renner Tech employees tomorrow. They needed to know that while leadership was changing, their jobs were safe, if they were willing to embrace creativity and innovation. Then, one last message came in. It was from Emily. I need to understand. Please, can we talk before dinner? I thought about it for a moment, then replied. Come by my office. The real one. Top floor of the Hanna building on 6th Avenue. Security will be expecting you. An hour later, Emily stood in my office. She looked uncomfortable. Her eyes moved around the space, taking in the view of Barrow Nature Preserve Park, the original artwork, the quiet signs of success she had never noticed before. Why? She asked. Why all of this? Why what? I said. Why I kept my success a secret. Why I bought Renner Tech. Why I let you all think I was failing. She nodded. I gestured for her to sit down. Because you and Dad never would have accepted it on my terms. You would have tried to make it fit into your version of success. Board meetings, quarterly reports, traditional business structures. But Dreamscape works because it's different. We create. We take risks. We do things our own way. But we're family, she said. We could have helped. Like you helped yesterday? I raised an eyebrow. Offering me an entry-level job out of pity. That wasn't help, Emily. That was control. She looked down, embarrassed. I never knew. I never even guessed, Emily said. That's because you never really looked, I replied. None of you did. You saw what you expected to see. The artistic sister who couldn't make it in the real world. You never once thought that maybe art and business could go together. Emily was quiet for a long time, staring out at the city skyline. So, what happens now? She finally asked. Now, we move forward, I said. Renner Tech becomes part of Dreamscape. We build something new together. If you're open to learning and growing, there could be a place for you here. But not as CEO, she said. No, I replied. Not anymore. She nodded slowly. I could see understanding start to show in her eyes. You're not just my little sister anymore, are you? I never was just your little sister, I said gently. You just never saw who I really was. That evening, as I stood to speak at our family dinner at River City Grill, I saw something new in everyone's eyes. Respect. Not pity. Not fake concern. Real respect. To new beginnings, I said, raising my glass. And to the art of success. Later that night, back in my penthouse, I opened an old sketchbook, the same one I'd carried with me in art school. It was full of the early ideas that later became Dreamscape's first projects. On the last page, I had written a quote that had guided me all these years. The greatest art is hiding your skill until the perfect moment to reveal it. I smiled as I closed the book. My masterpiece was finally complete.